concerns about the protests, and should the police be taking a heavier approach to them?
I think there are some things we need to say. Israel is not Netanyahu. The Palestinian people are not Hamas. And the protesters on the streets of London are neither protesting for Hamas nor are they hate marchers. I think this really clunky way of trying to kind of put everybody together into these groups and then set up these tribal rivalries is something that the government's got to stop doing. I've spent the last 48 hours talking to the organisers of the protest. I've spoken to people within the military. I've spoken to people within the Met to see where this is all going to eventually.
What do you make of Suella Braverman? She told our correspondent Ali Fortescue anyone who vandalises the cenotaph on a protest should be jailed faster than their feet can touch the ground.
Sophie, as somebody whose grandfathers both served in the British Indian Army, who served in the wars, somebody whose great uncle was taken prisoner of war, somebody who still has family serving in our British Armed Forces, there is nobody like my family who understands the value of the sacrifices that were made and the value of our armed forces and the value of the cenotaph. And that's why what disgusts me is that these protests had been planned for weeks. They were in discussions with the Met Police for weeks. The route was well away from the cenotaph for weeks. And yet last week, the Home Secretary decided to embolden and make this a political issue, to embolden the far right, to make this a political issue, knowing full well, and she'd been briefed by the Met, of what the route of the march was going to be and the fact that they didn't have concerns at this stage. She has now made this a live political issue.
Why do you think she's done that?
And because that's the way she operates, right? She fights culture wars. She doesn't fix things. I think she's dangerous and she's divisive. If you look at her rhetoric, it is always about pitching A against B. I've said this before. We have now, sadly, some of my colleagues in government who project as patriots, but they are indeed arsonists. They set this country alight. They pit community against community. They create these fires, and that is not the job of a government. The job of a government is to keep us all safe, and you do that by creating a sense of ease, not by fighting culture wars. So the question for us now is, and when I've been speaking to the protesters, the question for them now is, if we postpone, and they were in discussions with the Met on this, what happens when formal organisations step away from an organised march and we end up with informal groups, of which many have made arrangements to travel down here? So there's no proper policing, there's no proper management, there's no formal umbrella bodies. Do we create a more difficult situation on Saturday than if we continued with a formal march? So my advice to them has been, if you can postpone in a way which effectively means the police can police any fringe groups that may then fill that vacuum, that would be a good approach to take. But what we don't want to do is formal organisations to step back and make the job of the Met Police far harder, and all because the Home Secretary decided to make this a political issue and fight yet another culture war, a war that she didn't need to fight.